Okay, today, as you probably already noticed, we're going to be discussing the Great Barrier Reef. Now, the Great Barrier Reef is one of the world's natural wonders. I mean, this thing is huge. It's like 1,300 miles long, and it's off the northeastern coast of Australia. And it's not, most people mistake it as just one big reef. No, it's many little reefs. Like, this is one reef right here. But there's many other little reefs in the Great Barrier Reef that make it, the big, gigantic barrier that it is. So, but as you know, it's the largest group of coral reefs that there is. It is altogether about the size of Texas, and coral reefs are living structures built up over thousands of years by tiny animals called polyps, and they're cousins of jellyfish. And they look like this. Well, those are just some. They could look like this. Or this. Or that. Just any coral you can imagine is the base of a polyp. Now, there is lots of, things that need to be going on in a coral reef. Like, for example, everything builds up on each other in a coral reef. Like, you can't just have, one fish in a coral reef. I mean, maybe you can in a, a fish tank. But in a coral reef, some fish might eat other fish. They build up on top of each other like a food chain. And then corals, they eat the same thing. So there's a base there, they build up on top of each other, and you can't just have, one little coral reef. That's why the Great Barrier Reef thrives so well, because there's so much things to build up on top of that, everything always gets what it wants, food-wise or just, space-wise. I mean, there's lots of room in the Great Barrier Reef. So the polyps, they're a very tiny sac with tentacles. And then every living coral and fish, they digest phytoplankton. Now, hold on here. I think I might have some. Now, I don't just have this because the fish need it. I mean, because it's in the fish food that we buy. Like, it's, in these little pellets and stuff. But anyways, every food that we buy, comes with phytoplankton in it. But this is phytoplankton right here. As you see, there's a picture of a coral. And it is really helpful in needs of feeding, coral. Because sometimes you can feed big coral like anemones and stuff, phytoplankton, shrimp, frozen mysis shrimp or something. Because that's what I feed my fish. Sometimes I feed them the pellets. But I actually do have an anemone. He's hard to see, he's way back there, but my clownfish, I used to have one that kind of looked like Nemo, but I got rid of them because I really thought this guy was kind of neat. And he'll sometimes go in the anemone, but he most likely will swim around outside of it. And there's Dory. Okay, so now corals, they live together in colonies. Now I don't really have any, I might, but colonies are just lots of coral together. Like this here, just one of those little tentacles. Zoom in here. One of those little tentacles is just one of that coral. Now I didn't start out growing this coral with just one tentacle. I started out with it about half the size it is, and then it grows. Now some coral can move. Like these coral right here, they have the ability to move. Anemones, they have the ability to move too. Now this is a great feature for some coral to have, because if they didn't have it, like if they couldn't move, then, you know, sometimes, let's say, you know, shark comes by and he moves some of the rocks, and, you know, some of the rocks fall and stuff. Well, those coral are knocked under the rock, maybe, and they couldn't get any light, because coral need a very special light to live. I'll talk about that later, but the coral that know how to move, they'll just move above the rock so they can get more light. And they can move up and down the tank as they please. And sometimes this can get irritating because they can get on your glass and stuff. But, you know, you can just pick them up and move them. Alrighty, the coral is the skin, if you will, of, like, here, let me show you this coral. Now that coral right there, on top you see that kind of light pale greenish color, and it's not doing so well, but anyways, that greenish color as the skin, if you will. But underneath that you would see just all white, kind of like it looks bleached. Now if the coral looks bleached and it looks white, there's no skin on it. It means it's dead. Now when that skin falls off, it's just the coral, and it's, you know, it might come back, but chances are no. So coral is the skin, and underneath that is the coral skeleton. And I don't have any coral skeleton to show you because all my coral is living, but yeah. Alright. If you were to dive into the warm waters around the coral reef, there'd be lots of tropical fish, sponges, a type of coral, mushrooms, a type of coral, you know, lots of different types of coral, lots of different types of fish, stingrays, and all those sorts of stuff. And like I said, they form on this base. But it's just, you know, there's so many different species. I don't even have a millionth of them in here. So, yeah, now we'll move on to things that you need for the Great Barrier Reef to thrive, or any reef for that matter. And one of those is lighting. As you see here, I have a canopy. Now this is, the light is inside here, and you can just open this up and you see there's lots of different types of light. Like this is LED, this is a compact fluorescent, these are LEDs, and that light right there is an LED. I used to have a metal halide, and those are very powerful, and they just use up so much energy, I had to get rid of it. I still have it, it's in my closet, but I really don't want to get it out. It's kind of big. And here's an example of a T5. And I actually used to have this light on a different one of my tanks. This is actually over a turtle tank right now. I don't want to find them. Okay, yeah. So that's like the lighting part. But like I said, if you don't have a good light, the corals won't live because they absorb lots of nutrients that the light gives out. I mean, you can't just have a regular room light like this, you know, over a tank. It doesn't give out any your rays, like sunlight rays. Like the sun, it'll give out lots of really special kind of light. And, you know, that's why lots of the plants live, and you need to grow light for lots of the plants. Well, I mean, with coral, they need even better than a grow light. They need, you know, lights specially designed for coral that will help them grow and flourish. And the next thing is filtration. And in the reefs, you'll see lots of biological filtration. And all that is just, you know, live rock. And live rock is just, like, all this rock is, it's not alive. It's just the stuff on the rock is alive. Not like a snail you'll see. I mean, it's invisible. It's like, you know, that little bit of algae right there. It's not bad. It's more good, that little algae. But, I mean, if you see a whole clump of it right there, I mean, that's not good. But, you know, there's stuff on the rock sometimes that you can't see. Like, see that little purple stuff right there, or pink stuff? It's alive. I mean, it's growing on the rock. And that, the algae and stuff, that'll eat all the bad phosphates and stuff in the tank. And that will, you know, help your tank grow, kind of, because there's no bad things to, you know, not keep it stable. It's all good when you have that live rock. But sometimes in tanks you might want filtration because you don't have that much rock. I mean, the Great Barrier Reef, there's millions of pounds of rock, and that will really keep the ecosystem, you know, in shape. But we can't do that here. And another way the Great Barrier Reef filters itself is with evaporation. Water will evaporate, and when the water evaporates, only the fresh water evaporates. The salt stays down. That's when the salt level gets really high, right? Like right before it rains over the ocean. But when it rains, that's when it all comes back in, coming with new bacteria. And bacteria isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, some can be bad. There's lots of different types. Anyways, but for filtration, that you'd have in a tank, you'd have this. And this is the kind of the biological part. You have this, which goes down. That little box I showed you, water flows into the box, and then this tube siphons it into here. And that little pad right there, underneath that pad is this PVC pipe that runs up in there, and then the water will drain down there through this tube. Move all my food. And past this ball valve, and the ball valve, it can just kind of control some of the water, the amount of water that comes down into here, which is just this little pad that will kind of filter some of the water through, so the bad stuff will get trapped right there. And then this is actually kind of cool. Down in there you have what's called bio balls, and then those bio balls biologically filter the water. And then that drips. You see all those drips coming down? And that's because there's holes right in there. Drilled in. And that'll drip down through here. As you see, there's my heater. Let me come over here. You saw my heater was there. And then I have what's called a protein skimmer, and that is right there. Now if I were to get a flashlight, you would see tons of like bubbles and just poop in there, because that's what the protein skimmer does. Let me get a flashlight. I don't know if I have one here in my room. No, I don't. Alright, well, that is the protein skimmer right there. It'll suck up water, and then see what happens. When it makes the water into bubbles, because what happens, bubbles, or all the bad stuff collects on top of a bubble. So on the top of the bubble is like the dirtiest part of the bubble. Well, in that protein skimmer, that little collection cup right there, all the bubbles kind of flow over into that. It starts off at the bottom of the skimmer, just a tiny little bubble, and then when they keep going up and up through there, through the water, they pass through more waste and stuff in the water, and it'll build up on top of them, and then those will finally pop into the collection cup, and then the good water flows out onto this little bag right here, and this bag just holds carbon. See, the water drips down onto that bag of carbon, and then right here, this little kind of, it's just called an auto top off, and what that is with evaporation, you need to maintain, like my water level is always right there, and it'll never move, because it automatically will top off my tank for me. So whenever the water gets low, some of the water evaporates, I don't have to put it back in manually. It'll just do that for me. And how is because right there's a little switch, and it's like a little buoy, and then the buoy's nailed into the glass, so this part, back here at the glass won't move, but this part will. It's flexible right there, so when the water goes down and down, at the top of the switch, it opens up a little tube, but when it is back up straight and parallel with the glass, the tube is just closed, so no water can pass through. But when it goes down, water is able to come in through the tank. It's kind of confusing, but there's a pump right here, and then in here is a bucket, is a whole bunch of water, and that water, it's always pumping right there, but whenever right through here, but whenever this opens up, when the water level goes down, it'll just drip back into the tank, so it never moves. Yeah, and then the water will just, from here, that little pump will pump right back up through there and out there back into the tank, just, cycling through. Okay, so that's, basically it for coral reef. Yeah. Okay. Peace.